This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. We're recording live on Wednesday afternoon in a Google Hangout. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is episode 51, May 28th, 2014. Con, Camp, and Code. Wow, that's a mouthful. I'm Stephen Cross from Parallax Information Technology, and I welcome to episode 51, Jason Pimental. Hi, Jason.
Hey there.
It's officially the first show that I introduce myself first, so...
I think it's a good standard. I say we go with it.
Okay, great. We should have gone with me having a lower third, too, but no one reminded me.
Oh, well. You'll get there.
Can always add that in post.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see about that. So, Jason, what's new?
I'm getting pretty excited to head down to Austin on Monday for DrupalCon.
That's going to be one of our topics this week that we talk about, is what you and John are going to be thinking about and doing next week while Nick and I are slaving back home. So we're looking forward to talk about that. And speaking of John Picozzi, here he is.
Good afternoon.
Looks like he's in the Oomph office space today.
I am working from the lovely Oomph offices here in Providence, Rhode Island.
So what's new with you, John?
I'm just trying to figure out the biggest question of the week is to bring my cowboy hat or not to bring my cowboy hat.
I'm going with no.
That's really, yeah, I don't know. I was kind of excited to bring it because it's Texas, but Austin's kind of like its own little paradigm down there. So maybe it'll stay home this trip.
Does it match your cowboy boots, John?
I do not own a pair of cowboy boots.
Okay, all right. How about a big belt buckle?
I also don't own a big belt buckle, so I clearly cannot pull off the whole Texan outfit.
So maybe you ought to leave the hat at home.
Yeah, I guess so. Plus, it would be kind of hard to travel with, but anyway.
Nick, so while John is in Texas pretending to be a cowboy, what are you going to be doing in Middle Massachusetts next week?
I'll be continuing to work. I'll probably watch a couple of talks as they post them, and next week I'll be right here on the Talking Drupal show, hopefully with a couple interesting guests, but we'll see.
So
I've begun the roundup for that, by the way.
Yeah, we hear that. So our plan for next week's show is with John and Jason in Austin, that we're going to have a few people come on and probably do a pretty typical show next week, but have some guests that we haven't had on in the past and may not ever get on unless we ran into them at DrupalCon. So that's what we're going to try to do for next week's show.
I think what you meant was hog tie them at DrupalCon.
Exactly. And the following week, we're planning a DrupalCon recap show. So have John and Jason bring back all their information and things that they've learned and can share with us. So we're looking forward to 2 weeks from now. So I'm not sure what we're doing 3 weeks from now. We'll worry about that later. So for this week, let's spend a few minutes and just talk about DrupalCon a little bit. What are you guys looking forward to with DrupalCon? I assume you guys are flying out, maybe Saturday, Friday?
I'm not actually going out till Monday. No.
Oh, it starts on Monday, doesn't it?
Well, Monday's training day.
Okay.
So I wanted to. Monday's training day. Friday is the day for the code sprints, and so I wanted to try and be around for some of that. So that's where I added a little bit of time. Come back later in the day on Friday.
I am also flying out on Monday, but I will be leaving earlier in the day on Friday. It happens to be my anniversary, so I need to be back. Need to be back in the New England area at a reasonable hour to take my lovely wife out to dinner. So that's my travel game plan.
So something that you just mentioned a minute ago was Nick mentioned that he'd be watching some of the presentations online. Nick, do you know if any of the presentations are being live streamed at all, or is it sort of post presentation? Do you have any idea how that works?
No idea. I think they're all post.
In the past, they have been posting them pretty quickly. They're usually up same day, and then oftentimes the keynotes are live streamed.
Okay.
So that seems to be the typical mix.
I just saw it. Bring it until school's over.
But I was actually going through things that I've added to my schedule for next week, and looks like there's gonna be some really interesting stuff. A lot of stuff on Drupal 8, obviously, but along with that, some really nice ties into a lot of the stuff that we talk about in our Web Design Book Club too, just about design components and architectures for your theme and your CSS and stuff. But there's a Drupal 8 theme system session on Tuesday about how to sort of convert your thinking from hook theme to the Twig template system. And John Albin, the creator of the Zen theme, is giving a talk on managing complex projects with design components. So I'm betting that kind of coincides with ideas like Brad Frost's atomic design and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to that.
It's funny because Jason and I probably, other than the times we slate to get together and have a meal or a drink or just talk, probably won't see much of each other because I think Jason's probably doing more of the design UX track, and I'm doing more of the development Drupal 8 track. So I'm kind of excited about the exact opposite stuff that Jason is. Looking at some 10 e-commerce use cases. That looks pretty interesting. Securing your Drupal site. I am going to this Type Responsively talk. Might see Jason there. I don't really know.
I'm looking forward to that. Tuesday, 5 o'clock.
Be there, be square. Also talking about configuration commands and some different back-end command line sort of stuff. I'm also really excited about Drupal 8 and to learn kind of the new ways of doing things in Drupal 8 as far as hooking into modules and to the API and that sort of thing.
On the integration front, there's actually going to be a session on Thursday that is co-hosted by our pal Dave Sawyer up at Oho Interactive in Boston on integrating Drupal with Google Drive, Dropbox, and other stuff. And that one looks like it should be really cool. I'm looking forward to that.
So I haven't been to a DrupalCon, so I thought this was going to be the year, but it didn't work out. So tell me about the other stuff. I'm surprised we've gone this long without you guys mentioning the non-session stuff that you're looking forward to. What are some of those things?
Oh, we got tickets to some cool stuff.
What are they?
Well, our friends at Four Kitchens are throwing a few parties, and I think they're dubbing it 4 days of 4K. And Monday night at the amazing Alamo Draft House, they're having a screening of Office Space, which should be absolutely hilarious. You get, a theater full of Drupal nerds watching Office Space where you can get milkshakes and beer and all other kinds of tasty food snacks there. That is a recipe for success to me.
It's funny.
All I have to say about that is PC load letter.
That's one of my go-to movies that I probably watch maybe 10 times a year. I just can't get enough of it.
I think that the prize should be given out for the best Drupal analogies that people can come up with for PC load letter. I think because there's got to be so many. But there's another thing. We scored some tickets to go to a little private dinner shindig at Franklin's Barbecue on Tuesday night, and that is going to be amazing. Everybody says like that is the place to go to for barbecue. So
I'll have to bring an extra shirt that night.
Definitely. Maybe that's why you need to bring the cowboy hat, so you can just fill it up with some extra to take with you.
Oh, I'll hide my extra shirt in there.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, I guess the hat's going then.
So one thing that we'd like to encourage any listeners to do is reach out to John and Jason if you're at DrupalCon. Send them a tweet and hook up with them and say hi.
Yeah, please do, because we'd love to maybe try and capture some interviews with people that are fans of the show, and bring back some greetings to share. That would be awesome. So, just remember the Twitter handles @jpalmentel and @JohnPicozzi, and send us a tweet and come find us. I know we'll be there for the opening reception too on Monday night. That's at 5.
Definitely.
Good times. Good times. All right, let's move on to another Drupal conference that we're organizing. We mentioned it in last week's show, I believe, didn't we? Did we announce it? I can't remember now. But we made a public announcement last Tuesday of Nude Camp, which is New England Drupal Camp. And I went back looking through my emails this morning to see when this actually started. And there was an email that I wrote on January 10th to everyone here and a few more people. And it said, I'm exploring the idea of starting a Drupal Camp Providence in 2014. I'm hoping and expecting you would all be involved with exploring this process. And I immediately got replies from everyone saying, yeah, I'm interested. And then we look at, so that was January 10th, and on May 20th we had a public announcement. You can go to NEWDCamp.com, that's NEWDCamp.com. And in that time we've secured a venue, we've secured a keynote speaker, and we've done a public announcement and already have an event sponsor and some gold and silver and our other levels of sponsorship. They're starting to come in. So we got this thing rolling pretty quickly.
With that said, I'd just like to interject that sponsorship is still open, and we are still looking for sponsors. So if you're listening and you'd like to sponsor a Drupal camp in New England, let us know.
We'll be making the hard sell around the vendor booths when we're out in Austin. Bringing the hammer.
Yeah, it's not that hard of a sell either, I don't think. So
no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, there's such a great community, and we actually will have a great series of events this year. We'll have Design for Drupal in August in Boston. In Western Mass, there's the Nerd Summit that of which there will be a Drupal segment in September, I think. And then we'll have the New England Drupal Camp in November, and there's just there's such a great community, and there's so many talented people. I think it's going to be great to see this all come together.
So we're in our early stages with the conference, putting it together. We've got till November 1st to wrap it all up and make it happen. So one of the things we decided to do early on was start a blog that will detail our journey through it's maybe a team of 8 people, is it? On the team, 7 or 8 people that are working together to put this camp together, and it's the first one that we've ever done. So we've already had some bumps and bruises along the way, and I imagine we'll have more, and we're going to share everything we're doing and what we're learning and what worked and what didn't. So that is on the blog page of NEWDCamp.com. I encourage you to look there. You'll find a recent post about the name, and it's funny, it was probably 2 months ago that we were trying to pick a name for the camp, and when you start to put the acronyms together and the letters, this thing fell out that was Nude Camp, and it's caused a little bit of, I don't want to say controversy, that's not even the right word, right? Attention?
A little bit of a kerfuffle.
A kerfuffle, that's a better word. In the name, and I think everyone here was in complete favor of using that name, and then as we started to think about it more, we realized that the nuances of using the word Nude Camp the nuances of it are negative and positive. So there's a great post that Ellen, who's on the team, Jason's wife, she wrote about how we came up with the name and why we picked it. So I'd encourage everyone to go there to read about the name Nude Camp.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a good high quality post. I'm definitely excited about putting together the camp. It's definitely something I had on my mind for the last 6 to 8 months, prior to you mentioning it. So when you mentioned that you were thinking of putting something together, it was kind of an immediate yes for me. There's definitely been, like you said, there's been a couple things that we didn't expect as we were starting out. But nothing really, no major roadblocks at this point. As John mentioned, we're still looking for some sponsors, but we're definitely happy with the response that we've gotten so far. And hopefully in the next few weeks we'll start looking for some sessions. So if anybody's in the New England area and here's good session at DrupalCon, or has something that they thought was really good there and would like to hear up here, definitely let us know.
I think it's an important thing that we can't really stress enough. I mean, I think it's the reason why we did Responsive Bootcamp. It's the reason why we organized the meetup, and the reason why we do the show is I think we all really have a lot of experience, but also a really strong desire to help share that knowledge and help further that community and strengthen it, and help develop additional resources. And it's, any good idea is worth sharing. And I think people, in any small way, to be able to contribute something that you figured out. Drupal camps are a fantastic time to try that out. It's not quite so overwhelming to get in front of a bunch of people who are just like really kind of pretty in love with the same things that you're in love with, and that that's a lot of support to try out talking about an idea for the first time. So it'll be interesting. I hope we see a lot of first-time speakers. I think that'd be awesome.
And something to keep in mind as you either considering attending this camp or any other camp or submitting something is that there are all levels of attendees there. There will be people there that have not or are thinking about Drupal, haven't done anything yet. So even if your experience isn't enormous with Drupal, it doesn't mean that you don't have something you could share with somebody else. And another thing is it doesn't have to be Drupal specific. It's one of the things we're going to make sure that we address in our version of a Drupal camp is that there are so many topics related to Drupal development that don't necessarily have to do with core or installing Drupal. There's CSS, there's responsive design, there's little styling, there's web fonts. The list goes on and on of things we all deal with building sites when we're building with Drupal, but they're not Drupal specific. So keep your options open as you're thinking about submitting things to camps. So, anything else anyone wants to say about Nude Camp? And we'll be sharing information over the next few months and probably have a dedicated show to giving some details on how to put a camp together and how we have done it. So, John, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've also gotten pretty good community, actually excellent community support from the New England community and some of the other New England camp organizers, and I think it's worth pointing out that we're kind of spearheading this, but not without support from some of the other New England states and some of the other New England groups as well. So I think we're all very appreciative to that, and it's going to make for a better event.
Yeah, I would. I've not been in on all the communication, but I know that Jim Scavira in Western Mass and Matt Wetmore in Connecticut have been tremendously supportive. So it's exciting to see, especially when other events end up not coming through, trying to find something that can fill that void.
Yeah, even the Redfin guys up in Maine, I think it is.
Yeah.
Up north, if you will. They've been really supportive as well. So we appreciate all the support.
And as well, we'd be remiss without mentioning that John's company, Oomph, is our event sponsor. I'm not sure if we said that, but they stepped up very early on and said we'd love to support the event the best way we can. So their support early on made putting on this camp a very easy decision, or a much easier one, when they stepped up. So it takes all kinds to step up and contribute, and if you're out there and feel like you could contribute in some way, let us know. So I think that covers all of our camp stuff today. Anybody else have camping things to talk about?
I don't know. Like, the only thing that I wanted to mention, it's a little bit further afield, but if there's anybody listening who has been thinking at all about going to Future Insights Live in Las Vegas in 3 weeks, send me a tweet, and I've got some discount codes, and at least 15% off a ticket, and it's going to be a really great event. So just other learning-related activities. There's tons of great speakers going to be at that event, too.
Yeah, that would have been... That's if I could go to another conference this year, that would have been it.
Yeah, the nice thing with that one is it's really varied. There's stuff on mobile, there's stuff on app development, there's stuff on design, there's even stuff on wearable computing. So it's going to be a really interesting one.
Plus, you can gamble away your life savings when you're not in sessions.
Thankfully, I resisted the urge to try that last year. I don't really see that changing.
So, John, be truthful here. So, if that was the conference you would have chosen to go to second, is it because of the location?
Yeah, it's largely because of the location. I would say it's probably about a 60-40 split.
That high, huh?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's great.
Las Vegas. Come for the gambling and stay for the what?
I had one more thing that I was going to say about the camp, and I just slipped out of my mind. So let's move on. So we got a couple of Drupal topics that we figured we'd hit. The last few weeks in the show, we haven't talked a lot about site building and stuff. So we want to cover a few things today, things that we haven't touched on in the past. And the first one is RestWS. And we bring this up because I know that Nick is up to his ears deep in a project right now related to RestWS. So at this point, he's done some pretty interesting things, and let's talk about what this is. So I'm going to turn it over to Nick, to you, to sort of give an overview, and then we can move on.
Yeah, so there's kind of two major modules. One is RestWS. They both perform similar functions. One is RestWS and one is services. So when I got this project, I took a look at both of them and discovered that RestWS was basically accepted into Drupal Core. So I figured it had a little bit more, even though it had a couple fewer installs, it was probably the way forward. So I made that decision pretty early on. RestWS has been both a joy and a great pain, I guess you could say, to work with. It does a lot of stuff out of the box that's just absolutely fantastic. And the pain has really just been from lack of documentation, something that I can help fix. What RestWS does is it stands for RESTful Web Services. It makes every entity on your site into an accessible to the REST API. So, for example, you can do things like go to yoursite.com/node/1.json, and it will expose the JSON of that node entity to the web interface. Or similarly, you can do node/1.xml and get XML code. You can filter them, so you can pass variables, pass queries to it, and you could say, I want all. You can do like node.json, will show every node in JSON, or you can do node.json query type, and give a content type, and it'll show you only the ones of that content type. It's extremely flexible for viewing information. The reason why, and that's one of the reasons I was looking at it, one more importantly for my particular project is you can also post to it, so you can perform CRUD operations by posting JSON to your website. And I don't want to fall down the path of saying that it's incredibly easy, because every time you Google looking to do something with REST, everybody is saying REST is amazing, RestWS is amazing, it's so easy. And then there's not one single like in-depth example of this is a working example, and this is why we say that it was easy. I did find, although that being said, not having too much experience coding, in just under a week and a half, I have an example where I can post nodes, create taxonomy, and find out what vocabulary they're on, and I expect by the end of the week I'll be able to post files and images and attach them to the nodes as well. So I suppose for somebody that doesn't have very much coding experience, being able to get that far in 2 weeks is a very simple interface, and maybe some of the headaches have just come from the fact that I'm not much of a coder.
So Nick, talk a little bit about the use case, though. What exactly are you doing this for? So you can through an HTTP call from a third party, you can update and create records.
Yeah, so
Drupal records, or basically content. So you can add nodes, delete nodes, update nodes.
Yep.
What is the great use case for that?
Okay, so there's several use cases for that. There's two immediate ones for my clients. The reason why I started exploring the project that kind of put me on this track, I have a client that has a back-end PHP inventory control system, and he needs a way to display and make that information searchable. And he had made a couple attempts at building his own application, web application, to expose that, and had some difficulty. And knowing how Drupal works with performance and with Apache Solr for searching, I knew that Drupal was a good way of handling that. So the difficult part was then securely grabbing the information from his system and putting it into Drupal and making sure that it was up to date immediately. So RestWS allows me to give him the structure of the nodes, and he can post new nodes and updates to the Drupal system instantaneously. So REST is really just a way to communicate between two different systems. And in this case, it's it's posting new nodes. But another use case that's come up for me is, I've mentioned a newspaper client that I have a couple times. In conjunction with RestWS and a module called Views XML Backend, you can separate them even further. With with that Views module, you can have a dummy site that's pulling information from a central server. Excuse me, which sorry about that, from a central server without actually importing the Drupal content. So if you have a site that just needs to display something, it can do that, and RestWS can expose that information in a way that is useful to the client server. The third place, and I think that this will come out far more in the future, is you can use it so that Drupal can become a server for an app. So sometimes, posting information to an app or updating an app in the iPhone store or the Android store becomes tedious and difficult. So you can write an app that's just a wrapper that pulls the JSON from the Drupal site and will update instantaneously. And then you can handle some of the logic on your end, and you don't have to worry about getting through the code reviews. So, all in all, it's been a really interesting process. It's been, I can see, I can see the use case. I can see many things that are possible with it. I think the priority of that project really is documentation at the moment, because I think some clear examples could have made my process even. It could have changed it from, 1 or 2 week process to, an hour or two.
Yeah.
Nick, can you talk more about why you decided to use the RestWS module as opposed to the services module. Just because from looking at the modules and the usage statistics, way more people are using the services module than appear to be using the RestWS module.
We
Yeah,
got to
so-
look by version. Service has been around for a long time.
Yeah. There's a few key things that really made me decide RestWS, and I was tempted to switch to services a couple times. Number one, as I mentioned, is it's in Drupal 8 core. Number two, I think it handles every entity, whereas services doesn't handle every single entity as well. Number three, it also handles out of the box, handles the exposure part. I don't believe services allows you to do stuff like node-1.json and get the JSON in the first node. It does do that?
I think so.
Stephen is shaking his head yes. Okay, possibly. I might have just missed that. Another reason is I believe the main reason really was the Drupal 8-bit. And from talking to people, services a little bit more, has a bit more overhead. RestWS was more lean, and that's one of the reasons why it was chosen to go into Drupal 8, even though services was so well established. So.
I think there have been several different ways to solve it. I mean, the one that I used was actually feeds with a JSON path parser, and that one is just far less configurable. But I do have to admit, it was something that I had up and running in an hour.
It's only one way too.
Yeah, well, that's the other drawback.
That's pulling content, yeah.
Right.
So I've done that feeds route many times. There were a couple reasons why I couldn't do that here. One is the updates had to be instantaneous, and feeds. I mean, you can set it to run once a minute, but
it's not efficient.
Yeah, it's not efficient at all. And then there's some difficulty with deleting things with feeds. I mean, you can set things to expire, but they get out of sync all the time, and you have a risk if it deletes before. You know, if it deletes and then it's a minute until it runs again, then you have a minute of just a completely blank site.
Right.
And then you end up with stuff like they don't get indexed properly. So with this, we're able to. I mean, he does a push and they're updated instantaneously.
Right.
Although, like I said, I've used feeds many times, and when it's less time-sensitive feeds, it really is so much easier.
Well, I think they're all. I think the importance of them is they're all just an introduction to what has become a very normal standards-based way of interacting between web systems. And the fact that Drupal is adopting this into the core, I think, is fantastic, because that opens the door for using Drupal as a great content modeling and administration system to feed stuff into a number of different front ends, and app being one of them.
Okay.
But that was I had to spend at one point a huge amount of time creating a custom feed parser for AP. And being able to take structured content from a Drupal site and feed it into the Associated Press ingestion engine for nonprofits, and had to basically, code this thing up from scratch to get the right feed parser set up for them. And were they using a standardized interface like RESTful Web Services, it would have been a hell of a lot easier, rather than coming up with what was essentially a bastardized RSS feed format that they were using. And so being able to bring that more into Drupal core and operate with these other systems in a smarter way is awesome.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to learning it more fully. I mean, I would say the biggest road bump or speed bump that I hit was that there's a bug in the code that doesn't allow taxonomy creation. So I mean, that definitely had me run around in circles, like trying to figure out why the taxonomy array that I created wasn't working. But once, Stephen was very helpful in helping me figure out, how to fix the bug in the core module. But Yeah, the utility, the possibilities seem endless. I mean, it's like one of those things when you start building Drupal sites, you're a bit confused by a bunch of stuff, and then you realize, oh wait, I can build a content type for anything, and I can build a view to display it however and wherever I want. Oh my goodness, I can do anything. And now that I've started getting that understanding of RestWS and how REST works in the the wider world, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, oh, I can send my information anywhere I want now, and I'm not stuck with. And that's been one of the big pain points for that newspaper client, that they have to remember logins for all every site that they have. They have something like 14 sites at the moment, and then having to occasionally duplicate information, and now they can just have one central place. And it just immediately updates. So basically, the endpoint sites can be cached forever, and they'll be 10 times faster than they are now, and the databases will be tiny.
Right.
So it'll be. I mean, I think it's going to be a bit of a bigger project than I'm expecting, but it's still going to, instead of it being a 3-month project, I could probably do it in a week or 2 weeks. So.
One quick tip I want to mention: if you're going to play with the RestWS, you're typically setting it up in Drupal and then writing code, like in PHP, to access it from the outside. If you go into the module for RestWS, there's a folder in there with test, and there's examples in there of how to create nodes and update nodes instead of sort of digging around the internet to find that stuff. It's right inside the module.
That's great.
We discovered that this afternoon after spending countless Google searches trying to find examples. But yeah, that's a good tip.
All right, the other thing we wanted to talk about today is Drupal login, logout, reset password processing. Just because it's one of those things that kind of is like an out of the box. And I think what's there, you could challenge that it's not sort of web-friendly today in terms of some of the processes people are used to and some of the UI things that sit there. So I want to talk about some of those changes that we do to make the login, logout, reset password processes a little better and easier to use. I guess one of the things I wanted to start with here is I'm not sure if people are aware that if a user tries to log in 5 times, they get locked out of the system. And by default, they're locked out for 6 hours.
Wait,
which
really?
That's not documented, or at least it's not well known.
I've encountered that on a number of websites, and it is not fun.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so what happens if
not true for the admin, for the super admin? Because I swear I've changed my password and tried more than 5 times.
It could be not for admin. I'm actually not sure of it. I was testing it a while ago, and so what happens is if you try to one of your sites now, you'll see go in as a user, but on the 5th time, it will say you have tried too many times or you've reached the limit, and try again later. But that later is a long period of time. So
yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, so what happens is it goes into what happens when that happens is there's something called a flood table that the user gets entered into, and they kind of sit there with their login ID and their IP address, and it won't let them back until that period of time has expired.
Huh.
So one way around it is if they go to a different IP address, they can get into the system. If they now know their password suddenly.
Right.
So you're telling me that if one person, do they both have to match, or just one of the two things have to match?
So for a user, someone else from the same IP address can log into a different user account.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's an and condition.
Okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
True. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a measure to prevent brute force attempts at user accounts.
Right.
Absolutely is. And there's another flavor to that flood table, and it's if someone tries to get into tries to log in unsuccessfully like 50 times, during a period of time, I'm not sure if it's an hour or a day or what it is, then they end up in that flood table as well. That IP address ends up in there. So if it's not tied to one particular user account and it's like scanning different accounts, boom, they're gonna end up in that table after a period of time.
Cool.
And get blocked out.
It's good to know that those things are there. It'd be nice to know, but that's sensible precautions. And I
until
think
you forget your password and try it 6 different ways and realize that you're hosed for the next 6 hours.
So there's a few caveats here. So let's say the user does it 5 times, they get blocked out, then they hit reset password. When they get the reset password email and they click on it, we all know what Drupal does by default. It lets you into the system. It logs you in. Doesn't require you to reset your password. It just logs you into the system. That will bypass that flood lock.
Okay.
Unless they log out, and let's say they set their password and they log out.
No, they're going to be blocked out.
Try to log in. They're still logged out until that period of time is over.
That's a
little odd.
Yeah.
This is what I found from testing. So maybe there's someone out there who can tell me that's not what this is, but I'm pretty sure it is.
I think logging in, like the login system for Drupal is pretty good. And I've always found it to be an incredibly simple process, the reset password process. But I recently discovered, and by recently I mean the last 6 months to a year, discovered that it's actually really counterintuitive to most people, and the reason why I find it easy is because I'm used to Drupal.
Right.
Many times, if people are trying to log in, they don't. For some reason, they don't realize that they need to go into their user account to change the password. So the next time they try logging in, they still don't know their password, and they're going to be angry, saying that the website changed their password. So one of the first things that I do. The second thing is when they create their account, it requires their username and their email. And many websites allow you to log in with both, and Drupal doesn't. So,
or at least not out of the box.
Yeah, not out of the box. So there's
we'll talk about that.
2 modules. Well, I'll talk about the second one first. The one that allows me that fixes the password reset problem. There's a module called PRLP, which stands for Password Reset Landing Page, and it allows you to require people to reset their password before logging them in. So when they hit reset password and put their email in, it will send them the one-time login link, but instead of logging them in, it brings them to a page that asks for a new password and confirming the password. And then it logs them in and sets that password as their password. So it forces them to set something.
Right,
and
which
then it
is
logs
sensible. That's what should happen.
Yep. The second thing, and again, one of the reasons why it's so confusing that you can't use your email is if you try to reset your password. So you can't use your email to log in, but when you want to reset your password, you can give your username or your email to reset. So then I find people try their username, realize they've forgotten their password, send a reset link, and then try using their email the next time they go there. So the module that I use for that is Login Toboggan. And Login Toboggan it gives you a ton of control over the login process, but pretty much the only thing I really use it for generally is allowing the email and the username to be used. And I think that's a module that you introduced me to, Jason.
Yeah, it's actually one that I originally learned about from Jeff Robbins, I think, who is the creator from Lullaby. I don't think he's still involved in it, but yeah, it's got some great functionality. It allows you to sign in with your username or your password, or your email address rather, and it also has a nice way to insert a login screen if you're trying to follow a link to password protected content. So that way, if you have like private content, organic group stuff or whatever, and somebody sends a link to a message and they try and follow it, they can't get to that page, and instead of bouncing them out to the normal login screen, it presents them with the login and then passes them through to the content that they were expecting to find. That's really one of the key features for me, that and the logging in with an email address.
Mm-hmm. I think I use that too. The 403 redirect piece.
Yeah. So
I think I use that too.
Yep.
Quite a bit actually.
I wanted to mention one more thing back on the flood table. There are 2 modules that I played with a bit. One's called Flood Control Module, which allows you to refine the parameters for when things end up in the flood table. So you can set the 5 login limit to 10 or 1 number of times before they get the failure, and the length of time that they're blocked. So there's some configuration there.
Nice.
Also, you can clear the flood table with Flood Unblock module. If you've got someone stuck in there, you can easily clear the flood table for them so they can get in.
I think we should set a day where everybody sets the login limit to 1, just to see how many people get stuck in that flood table.
I'm just still trying to figure out what the tie-in is with Halo. I just picture all those weird little aliens from the Flood.
I'm not following that reference.
It's the only video gaming reference I have, Steve. Thanks. And
Okay.
it totally left me hanging.
Oh, you were talking about Halo, the video game. Okay. Still don't understand the reference, but okay.
Well, that's... Oh, never mind. Forget it.
And now on to the module of the week.
That was a massive fail. Actually, before we do that, though, I think there's a couple things that are worth kind of going over about what Drupal does provide in terms of smart links. Because we used to use the the user menu module. I think it was called user menu, and that would add what is now built into Drupal Core, which is a separate menu that has a my account link and a logout link in it. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why it didn't have a login link until I realized that you can actually add that really easily by creating a menu link that goes to user/login, and if you are logged in, that link will simply not show.
Right.
Yeah.
It handles that for you.
Yeah. And so, oddly, I think it could handle logout in the same way, but
It does.
but in terms of they supply it, and I don't think they really need to. But the my account is the good one because that one will only show if you're logged in, and it will programmatically form that link so it will go to the appropriate account page. So you can have a nice collection of these utility type links that will intelligently show or go away. But creating that login link was one that for the longest time I didn't realize how simple it was to do, and I kept thinking I had to, go figure out how to code something for that.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure that out as well, but it's pretty useful. And there's one other module I wanted to talk about. I found that I have a use case where I have a client that needs to be able to create many user accounts, but I don't want him having to figure out, generate passwords for them and then email passwords, because that's just a recipe for success, I think. So there's a module called Generate Password, which will allow you can set a bunch of parameters. You can, for example, say the password has to be 10 characters long, or it has to include, a capital or something. You can allow it to email the password when it's created, a bunch of stuff. But the really key part for me is I was able to remove the password form from the create user form. So I have a site where a client needs to be able to create users, but doesn't need to know that they're users, because sometime in the future they may need those people to log in to view their information, but at the moment they don't. So I found that they were getting extremely confused when it was asking for 2 passwords every single time, and this generate password allows them to not see them. And then in the future, if they tell their clients that they have user accounts, they can just use the reset link and get their own password.
Nick, what is the name of this module? I'm not sure you said what it was.
Generate Password.
It is, okay. There you go. All right, excellent. Let's move on to our, talking about a lot of modules today. Let's move on to Module of the Week.
I think this is another one that I selected. It's sort of related to what we've been talking about, and it's administer users by role. So administer users by role allows you to specify which roles can handle user operations based on the user's role, if that wasn't complicated enough. So for example, if you have a developer role, you can say a developer can create any user except for an admin user. Or you can say a developer can edit only other users that also have the developer role. And it gives you many levels of fine-grained control. It gives you create, update, delete, and I think there's a fourth permission that lets you edit it if it has other roles. So for example, if a user has 2 roles, and one of them they have permission to, but the other they don't, they won't be able to edit it. But you can also change it so it's just an or. If they have 2 roles and they only have permission to edit 1 role, they can edit that user anyway. I found it to be fairly robust.
Yeah, I actually also use this module, and the instance where we used it was for an intranet. We were the admin users because we were building the site, but there were intranet admins or web admins that needed to be able to create and edit permissions for the user accounts below them. And we used this module to give them the ability to do that. So they couldn't, as Nick said, they couldn't go up and create admin or super admin roles, but they had the ability to work their way down the list and give editors certain permissions and take permissions away from certain roles. So it was really useful in that instance.
Now there is one pretty big caveat, and it may have to do with another module that I had installed in this particular site called Role Assign, but I found that if a user had a role that they didn't have permission to edit, and they edited their own, but they had like the administer users role, and they edited their own account and saved it, it would remove the role that they didn't have permission to edit, which can occasionally cause some confusion.
Well, yeah, especially if they're bounced out of their own normal admin process.
Yeah, and it saved successfully, I think, too.
I mean, I think it is worth mentioning that also that role assign is a really good, reliable way to allow one level of admin to create other users. It's just not as configurable. But if your needs are simpler or more straightforward, that's a pretty easy one to set up. So
I think it's important to use, if you're using administer user by role, you probably need role assign as well, because you need to be able to restrict the admin user, the admin role. So.
Yeah, I think as with any sort of permission handling in Drupal, you got to test really thoroughly to make sure that the layering of these things is going the way you want it to. I mean, I think that's I'm sure we've talked about the Masquerade module. I feel like that one should just sort of go along with almost any of these things we talk about, so you can easily switch and test and make sure that you can see that content or not, or can edit that user or not.
I agree. I don't know if Masquerade's in Core, but I think it would, no, it has not moved to Core, but it would be a good candidate at some point for the admin.
All right. So let's wrap up today's show. First, as we wrap up, I want to thank Daniel J. Lewis last week for stepping in as guest host. You could listen to that show at talkingdrupal.com/050, episode 50. And if you haven't heard it yet, we do a little role reversal, and Daniel is the host of the show and interviews the 4 of us. So, guys, was there anything revealing in there during that week, or anything shocking you heard from any of us? Or do we all know each other like old spouses at this point?
I don't know. I think it was a good show. I learned a couple of things.
Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. I think the most entertaining part for me was the how did we all
Propose
to our wives. So that was a fun way to wrap up that show. All right, so Jason, where can people find you online, and what do you have coming up? You always have something coming up.
There's always something. You can find me at jpalmentel on just about any social network. You can find work at hwdesignco.com, and just got edits back on my new book, so that's available from O'Reilly and getting better every day. That's responsive typography coming from O'Reilly, and be talking about that next week at DrupalCon. Be giving a talk on Tuesday on responsive typography, and then again a workshop and another talk at Future Insights Live in Las Vegas coming up. It's like the 16th to the 20th. So June's busy.
Excellent. Well, hopefully you have safe travels, and we'll speak to you with Mr. Picozzi next week. Hey, John, tell us where you'll be next week.
Next week, I will also be at DrupalCon. Not doing any talking, but doing a lot of listening, and plan to be doing a lot of tweeting as well. So, if you want to follow me and figure out what I'm getting out of DrupalCon, you can do that at John Picozzi on Twitter and at John Picozzi on all the major social networks. You can always find me at oomphinc.com as well.
Kind of reminds me that I think Twitter has a new feature out called Mute, right? Has anyone tried that yet? Where it's for examples of when someone's at a conference or something. Not that we would do this to either of you two guys, but when the non-stop tweets come out, you can just click someone on mute for a while and then unmute them later. So
that's been a popular feature in a lot of Twitter clients for a long time.
Right. It's supported, I think, directly from Twitter now.
Yep.
So, well, good luck, John. And Nick?
Unfortunately, I will not be going out to DrupalCon this year. I was thinking it was going to be the first time, too, for me, but, plans changed. So I'll be right up here in Worcester working hard, trying to, building some interesting sites and
working on those web services.
Yeah, working on web services and web servers. A little bit of both.
All right, great. So I'm Stephen Cross. You can find me at Stephen Cross on Twitter. That's with a PH, or parallaxinfotech.com. And you can also find me now at NEWDCamp.com. So everyone, take care, have safe travels, and we'll talk to you from Austin next week.
Right on.
Take care, guys.
Bye.